I want to introduce you to Jesus a little bit different way. I want to give you just a different picture just for a second. Before we move on to talk about my picture of the church, I want to say one thing about Jesus. Jesus was sometimes, you think about his teachings a moment. What do you know about the teachings of Jesus? If you haven't heard them a lot, if you're not a life singer in here and you haven't heard about the teachings of Jesus, what are the teachings of Jesus? We think they're pretty simple. There's nothing new. There's nothing really radical. There's certainly nothing dangerous about them. In fact, you could boil down the teachings of Jesus, the way most of them understand them, to two simple words. Be nice. Just be nice. That's the way we think the teachings of Jesus are. But the truth is this, if that's all that the teachings of Jesus are about, we might as well pack up and go home. And Lifesong might as well not be a church, because Barney, the dinosaur, can tell you to be nice. Being nice, if that's all that the teachings of Jesus are about, then that's not much, is it? Every religion in the world says be nice in one way or another, doesn't it? What is it about Jesus that I want you to know? First thing I want you to know, and some of you are wondering, when is he going to take off that apron? And there's a reason I haven't taken it off yet. And that's because one thing I want you to understand about Jesus' teachings, I want you to consider this. If you have not looked into the teachings carefully, you ought to do this, because one thing you will discover is that sometimes Jesus was absurd. His teachings are absurd. They're weird. I put this on, but you know what's interesting? Some of you might just say that David, Pastormac guy, he's just weird. Now some of you are nodding, but be that as it may, whether you think that's the case or not, what I want you to understand is this is not just a sort of postmodern gimmick. I am in good standing. The God of Jesus, in the God of the Old Testament, he sent his prophets out dressed sort of like this. He had them do weird things. He had them behave in absurd ways to get people's attention. And Jesus himself is the one who said at one point to get people's attention. Now hear this, because if you spiritualize this, this is just spiritual. But consider being in a moment when Jesus is about to make a big statement, and he very sternly addresses people, and what he says to them is, you open your mouth as wide as you can and you swallow the whole camel. You think, yes, that's very spiritual. It's not very spiritual. That's weird. Picture that image. That's what Jesus wants you to do. When he says that, he wants you to think about what that means. It's a cartoon, isn't it? Swallowing a whole camel wide. It's bizarre. It's absurd. It's strange. Jesus' teachings are not simple Sunday school, safe, namby-pamby, milquetoast, lukewarm kind of messages. They're aprons and cash registers and staffs. They're bizarre and they're absurd and they're pretty strange. Sometimes, I love this too, you know how many pictures throughout the entire course of my life, I have seen a lot of pictures of Jesus. That might not surprise you, I'm a pastor, I'm supposed to. That's probably what I do on my free days. I have seen a lot of pictures of Jesus. And I have only seen one in my entire life of Jesus laughing. Does that strike you odd? A man who lives 33 years of life, interacts with people, engages with people, spends a lot of time with people, most oddly, is really loved by children. Children want to climb on him. They are so obtrusive that the apostles had to keep the children away. I know children, I got 7 of them, and children do not gravitate to grumpy faces. They just don't. Children don't gravitate to people who do not laugh or play, do they? They certainly don't get excited about somebody who doesn't laugh or play. For the children to be wanting to be near to Jesus, for the children to want to clamor, I think he had to be a man who knew how to have fun, who knew how to laugh. Another occasion, somebody asked Jesus, they asked him a question about taxes, a heavy theological, political, economic question. How can you get more serious than that? Political, economic, religion. That's like touching all the areas you're not supposed to talk about. If they could have thrown sex in there, it would have been a really touchy question. But they just asked him a question about taxes, and you know what he does? He rolls up his sleeves, and he says, nothing up this sleeve. Nothing up this sleeve. And he pulls a fish out, and he opens up the fish, and he pulls out a coin. The guy's doing magic tricks. In the middle of this serious conversation. There's no reason that Jesus had to do it that way. He was making a point, I get that. He's showing them that he's in control. He can pull a coin anywhere, out of any place he wants. He doesn't need your money. And yet he did it in that way. That, to me, strikes as someone who has a little fun. Somebody who understands the value of that. Jesus could be absurd. Jesus could be fun. Jesus could throw back his head and belly laugh. One picture I saw was Jesus laughing like that. one. The rest of them, he looks stern, or sorrowful, or frankly sometimes confused. Just kind of unsure what he's supposed to do next. Jesus wasn't that way either. Jesus was stern. There were times he was very stern. But you know who he reserved his sternest comments for? His most condemning, righteous, wrathful moments for? Not the prostitutes who he was willing to hang out with. Not the thieves that he was willing to hang out with. Not the poor and the lowest and the most wretched. Not for them. But nor did he simply reserve it for a certain class of people at the upper end either. He was just as comfortable, hung out just as well with the wealthy, the tax collectors, and the politically strong. He didn't reserve his wrath for any particular class of people, for any particular race, for any particular creed. Jesus was, in the truest sense of the word, very tolerant. He understood tolerance in a way we only begin to try to reach for. He was very kind. But when he was stern, he could be sarcastic. He could be angry. He could be bold, confident. He could speak words that would make you waver. And when he was stern, he leveled it for those who were self-righteous. For those who believed they had no need to know Jesus. For those who put burdens upon people that were too large for other people. He kept his sternness for those who dealt in sternness. He kept his condemnation for those who dealt in condemnation. This is who Jesus was. He was bold, he was confident, he was strong, he was loving, he was gentle. This is the way he taught, and this is the way he spoke. But there's one more thing I want to share, and this is the thing I want you to begin to grasp. This is the thing I want you to really think about this morning. This is going to be our topic at Lifesong for the next several weeks. This is going to be our series. This is what we're going to talk about. The thing I want you to understand about the teachings of Jesus is you cannot simply take or leave them. They are not simply something you wink at. They are not simply something you hear and shrug. Phrases like be nice, you can say, yeah, of course, sure, I get it. Good. Jesus didn't simply say, come to my church, because that you can simply walk away from, can't you? All right, I'm not going to your church. Jesus, don't know what it is, don't like it, don't want to be there. No, here's the problem. Here's the thing about the teachings of Jesus. The teachings of Jesus, the ideas that Jesus presented were dangerous. They were radically new. They were unique in many ways. They were dangerous. They were dangerous in this fashion. They were dangerous because if you decide to be a follower of Jesus, at Lifesong, our most fundamental belief is that we want to be like Jesus. But the teachings of Jesus are dangerous because following his teachings is not a hedge your bets kind of move. It's not something you can do and just think, well, I can just kind of do it just to make sure I got all my bases covered. It's not a bases covering kind of move. The truth is, and you ought to hear it if you've never heard it, hear it from me, hear it now. The truth is, if you follow the teachings of Jesus and he's wrong, if he's wrong, you will not be okay. If you follow the teachings of Jesus and he's wrong, you will destroy your life, and it will have been in vain. This is one of Jesus' most earliest, strongest, most confident followers said. Paul, he said, if it turns out that what Jesus has taught us is not true, we are more to be pitied than anybody else in the entire world, because we have given our life to it. But the other side is equally true. This is why they're so dangerous. These are ideas you can't get away from. Once you've heard them, they force you by the very essence of what they are into a decision whether you want to make it or not. Because if the teachings of Jesus are right, if the ideas he presents are true, if the things he says to you, as radical and amazing as they are actually real, if it's more than philosophic contemplation, if it comes down to the reality of the universe and you ignore those teachings, then you are missing the very keys to life itself. Jesus does not present his teachings in a way which allow for any other interpretation. He does not say, here's a good idea, give it a try. He does not say, here's something I've been thinking about, wonder how it works. Jesus says, this is life, everything else is death, Now make your choice.